I debated on releasing a video today because I was just really pressed for time. But then I thought about all of you guys and how much I enjoy reading the comments from you all. A special shout out to Timmy, Jody, and Mary. So here's a story for you. Sorry, it's a little on the shorter side. I grew up in a rural section of the Appalachian Mountains. I loved it there. There was a peace in those mountains that I've never found anywhere else. The air was clean and crisp, and the woods were incredibly quiet, which I guess some people don't like. I was used to it though, since it was all I'd ever known. But I had an encounter one year that changed my feelings about the place. It was during hunting season. My uncle had come up from Florida to go deer hunting with us. He had come up a little before the season started, so he and my dad could go over all of their gear. I was in my late teens then. I had a dog that was part Alaskan Husky and part German Shepherd. I'd go hiking pretty often and my dog Max would always go with me. He was a good-sized dog given the two breeds he was mixed from. He didn't scare easily and was really protective. The day before hunting season started, we were out on one of our usual hikes. We'd go up the hill behind my parents' house to an old cold mining road. There were a couple of cold water springs near the road. Usually when we got within 100 feet or so of the springs, Max would run ahead and get a drink and cool off. Well, he took off, and because of the trees and the brush, I couldn't see him, but I knew where he would be. I stopped and took a drink from my water bottle. As soon as I started moving again, I heard Max running back down the hill. I figured he was coming back to check on me, but he was running full force toward me with a panicked look on his face. I'd never seen that look before. He turned around to look up the hill, and he bared his teeth. Then he started growling, very low and frightening. He was standing stock still, just facing up the hill. I called his name, and he gave a big yelp and took off running full force down the hill again. I thought that was odd, but I kept heading up. I knew Max would just go on home if that's what he wanted to do. I was hoping to see what might have spooked him. There wasn't much wildlife to be feared at the time. Usually just squirrels and chipmunks and possums and stuff. The scariest thing might be a bobcat, but I'd never seen one the whole time I'd lived there. I reached the top of the hill without seeing anything scary. I was leaving when I spotted these antlers through the trees. There was a lot of rustling noise coming from that spot, which was a little weird because in my experience, deer are usually so silent. I couldn't imagine Max getting spooked by a deer. He'd been around plenty of them. Anyway, I hoped it was a good sign of whitetail in the area for the start of hunting the next day. I turned to head down suddenly and I was hit with this absolutely putrid smell of rotten flesh. Like if you forgot some meat in your fridge for months and then opened it up. I headed out of there and got home and found Max in the yard waiting for me. He seemed really restless and pacing around. I couldn't figure him out. I told my dad and uncle that I had spotted a deer. They were excited to get going the next morning. We got up at first light and headed out. We were real amateurs when it came to deer hunting, but my dad had found a spot he liked and had set up the pop-up blind the week before. We got to the blind, which was set up near this stream. I had binoculars with me so I could do some bird watching while we were sitting there. Waiting on deer can get incredibly boring. You have to be so quiet. Even the snacks we brought were not the crunchy kind, but I was ready to pay attention. We'd probably been there a couple hours when we started hearing this high-pitched sound that sounded like a wounded animal or something. We didn't see anything. It could have been anything, really. But the next thing that happened was we were hit with that terrible smell of rotting meat. My God, I can't describe it. It smelled like death. My uncle gasped and pointed towards the creek. He had his hand over his nose trying to cover up the smell. We looked and saw this horrible apparition rise up out of the creek, and it was standing there 30 yards away. It was something tall and skeletal. The head looked like a deer skull with antlers, and these yellow glowing eyes out of the sockets. I swear this thing was 7 feet tall, and it seemed like it had tattered flesh just hanging off of its body. It was walking on 2 legs, and they looked like they were legs of a deer. It seemed like something you would dig out of a grave, but it was moving and scanning the forest. We all just crouched there peering out of the blind. It didn't seem to have seen us. We were petrified and just stayed quiet and didn't move a muscle. Then it lifted its head and stared into the distance like it had spotted something. And then it just flashed away at superhuman speed. I can't even describe how it moved. It was just gone. We split out of there as fast as we could. We didn't even speak. We all sped down the mountain like our lives depended on it. To this day, we have no explanation what the hell that thing was. And I'm sad that I don't feel comfortable in those woods anymore, but I feel like that was a really close call.